Yep. Welcome to the MMU Mind Made Up podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'll give you a few moments to get settled in your seat so you can be locked in. Let's go.
Think I need to move around, yeah, that's my mood now. Burning with my broski, back at the boondock, at the spot, yeah, I put the racks in the futon. That's just the way I roll. I already rolled up, I can't just roll one. Some say I'm too much, some say I'm too much. Some say I'm too much. Nobody doing nothing, shining like a diamond, like my daddy was a jeweler. Back when my big brother told me I was too young, trying to keep my cool, but I just might be too much. Snatch out too much.
And welcome to the MMU Mind Made Up podcast. I'm your host, Al Ramsey. And I appreciate y'all for joining me on this very special first episode of the podcast. So I hope you all are able to sit back and enjoy what I got going on today. Before we do get started, though, I want to leave you all with a quote. And this is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It reads, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." I want you all to take time to think about that because I think it's very relevant in today's world with everything that's going on. But I want to introduce you all to my very first guest. I'm honored to have him on today. It's a good friend of mine. This is somebody that I've known probably for like 2 years now. But it seems like we've known each other a lot longer because our mindsets are so similar. Our ambition and our hustle are very similar to each other. So we kind of clicked from the jump. I'm really hoping that you all can take something from what this guy has to say about his journey and his career path and his entrepreneurship and just chasing his dreams, the success that he's obtained. Because to be honest, this man has done a lot of big things. And I'm excited for y'all to hear everything that he's got going on and the things that he's gone through to get to where he's at now. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to my very first guest here at the MMU Mind Made Up podcast, the host of the MVP podcast, my main man, Max Van
My
Alken.
guy,
Max,
I
what's
really
good?
appreciate that, man. I was that quote. That's a really deep quote, and I think that's an amazing quote to use around this time. And then on top of everything you just said, man, I couldn't agree more. But the same thing's about you. You inspire me just as much as I inspire you, man. So I'm doing great. It's always another day. Breathing's always another great day. And then I am honored to be on your podcast, man. I've been wanting you to do this for a very long time, and now that you have it, I'm so happy for you. I know you're going to do so great. So it's a pleasure to be on, man, anytime.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that for sure, man. So we're just going to get right into it, bro. Man, crazy times we're living in, bro. Crazy times, right?
Yeah, it's insane, and it's something that I remember. I called up Rob Parker's like a mentor of mine, and from FS1, and I called him, and I called Rashad, and I remember Rashad Phillips, and I'm like, I've never been in times like this, and I don't know what to do with my show. Do I need to pay respect and not really do anything because this pandemic is such a? At first, it was COVID-19. So I'm leaving Miami when this kind of broke out. And that's where it was really bad. And I'm like, I'm not sure what to do. And Rob was like, Max, no one has seen a time like this. No one's seen a pandemic like this. This is not something you just have an answer for. No one has an answer. He said, just take every day at a time. And instead of using this time to just sit on the couch and not do anything, use this time to improve yourself, focus on your podcast, focus on your show. So in a weird way, not to take away from all the lives that have been lost from just COVID-19, because it's a very serious situation, but I've improved myself, relationships with friends, relationships with family, my show, and honestly, it's benefited me. Again, I'm not trying to downplay the situation because people have died and lost their lives, but to me, it's allowed me to improve upon things that I think I needed to focus on more of. And as far as the protests, I hate to see George Floyd and just all these other people that are losing their lives to social injustice, but at the same time, I'm so proud to see people stand up for what's right and come together. And it's this is long overdue for change, and that's why I loved your quote in the beginning of this, because that quote right there kind of symbolizes everything that's going on. There's no need to be silent anymore, and for everyone to come together for what's right. It's a beautiful thing to see. Like I said, I hate to see why we have to do it, but it's a beautiful thing to see people stand up for what's right together. So it's a strange time for sure.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I think that what the advice you were given about going hard. I think all hustlers, all like hard workers, we kind of take any excuse as a chance to go even harder. You know what I mean? So it could be a world war going on. Like, you know what? I ain't gonna stress out. I'm gonna just take this opportunity to go harder. Like, you know what I'm saying? So for sure. And that's because, when you grinding, like the grind doesn't stop and it's always push harder, push harder. So no doubt, I think you're doing the right thing by continuing on to push out your content and develop yourself. And then as far as the COVID, man, yeah, it is crazy. I think, being in Florida, I have family out in California and other parts of the world too. And it hit those spots harder than it did the South, or at least Florida, So while the rest of the world, or the rest of, pretty much the world, I think the southern half of the United States was probably like the last people to take it serious, you know what I mean? And we're in there. So while the rest of the world and even the rest of the country was taking it super serious, Floridians were living life as normal. So, I didn't start taking it serious until the pressure was really put on me by family members outside of the state. And I'm like, okay, let me take the proper actions that need to be done. And now we're at a point where it seems like it's dying off, where it's not as big a deal because of the fact that, the whole George Floyd incident, and then the many others that have followed since then, as well as the protest. And what you said is true. It's unfortunate that it's happening like this. But it does feel good to see so much unity between people. And I was telling a friend of mine when I saw that other countries were protesting for us and everything like that. I was like, yo, I didn't even know other countries cared about us that much. So it felt good to see that, you know what I mean? And it also made me feel like from now on, when we see injustice happening across the world, like when the Japanese citizens were pretty much going to war with their government, and we didn't, like, I was just kind of looking at it as another video on WorldStar. It didn't raise any red flags in my mind, or it didn't make me want to spread awareness to it or anything like that. I now kind of feel like we have a responsibility to speak up against that type of stuff as well, because if it affects one, it affects us all, and we're not much different from any of those people. It's just a distance thing and a language barrier. But you know what I mean? Unjust is unjust, and all people kind of want the same thing, which is to live in peace, man, and enjoy this wild ride called life,
Yeah, and I was in such a weird position, Alex, because I've always, like, all right, I'm a white dude, right? So I couldn't ever fathom or understand what a black person has to go through. I can't, and it would be disrespectful to act like I know what that feels like, because I don't. So I don't ever want to disrespect anyone by like, oh, I know exactly what you're going through, I'm here right with you, because I don't. All I can do is be there and support and give everything I can to help, because it would be disrespectful for me to act like I understand what you guys have had to go throughout history and now. So I always try my best, because my brother Rob, my brother from another mother, he's black, I'm white, and his family is more my family than my own. And it never hit me until I realized, like, when we were driving and I was actually speeding, and I thought a police officer was going to pull us over, and I said, man, I'm not about to just take this man, because I know I'm not speeding and I know he's riding my tail. He's like, please just don't do anything. I don't need to be in that situation. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, I don't need to be in that situation. and it took me a second, and I was like, yeah, you look at it through a completely different lens.
Completely.
And so it's like it takes like everyone to make a change. So I wanted people to know it's not black versus white. I want it to be us versus evil. but Black Lives Matter, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, all lives matter, but Black lives is what's the focus right now, and that's what matters. But it takes everyone from every side to understand that, to demand change. So I'm just making sure I do everything in my power. Like I said, even though I'm not in your shoes, I want to make sure I can help in every way possible, because that's what the world needs, man. We need peace, we need happiness, and we need equality, and obviously that's not happening. And so it just hurts me to see it. Anything I can do, I'm really trying my best to do. And it's like, I think we're seeing these protests, and the fact that we're not backing down, and even though even these peaceful protests are getting gassed and they're getting like pushed around, and they're not backing down. It's like, we're still going to keep doing this, and it's just amazing to see people all shapes, sizes, types come together and just stand for what's right, man. So like you said, you hate to see it, but you love to see people come together.
Yeah, definitely, man. And one thing that I've noticed throughout this whole thing is people that I've come into contact with. For instance, I had an old supervisor, my very first supervisor when I was in the Air Force. He was a white dude from Michigan, and since this whole thing has happened, all the different incidents, and the George Floyd video was released, he wrote me a long message, kind of apologizing for any viewpoints that he's expressed to me that may have come across disrespectful. And he pretty much laid it out, like the reason why he had the thought process that he's had up until now, where I think he's beginning to see a change in it, is because of ignorance and lack of exposure and understanding to the other side of it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what this incident and this day and age, this time period is doing for certain people that are just kind of open and not still, because you do have the people that are still guarded. They could kill a kid on videotape and they'll still be like, man, that kid had a history of referrals and suspensions. You know what I'm saying? But so there are those people, but there are other people that are kind of like, you know, they believe what they believe. And I'm not saying because he voted for Trump, but just having that type of understanding of what Trump represents and being raised that way and believing that without any remorse for the people that it affects. You know what I'm saying? Those type of people are coming around and like, nah, you know what? This shit isn't right, you know? And they're finally kind of waking up and realizing this. So that's a beautiful thing to see.
Communication is key in anything you do, like relationships, sports, business, anything. And I think we saw that with Drew Brees. Drew Brees was like, oh, no, that's disrespectful to the flag. Colin Kaepernick kneeling. I'll never support that. And he's like, now you can say, now some people believe he's saying and he apologized because of the backlash he got. But other people are saying, it's just, a lot of this is just miscommunication and misunderstanding this. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you guys weren't disrespecting the flag. This is about social injustice. And you're right. There is social injustice. And one thing that I pride myself on, and what I really try my best to do is, and especially in this business and being the broadcasting business and doing podcasts, I have to be able to communicate with anybody, no matter religion, race, politics. I'm always willing to communicate and listen to other opinions, because that's how growth happens. That's how change happens. And I think we're going to see that. And of course, the world's not perfect, and there won't be just perfect examples all across the board. But when you see change in someone, like you just said, and seeing change in Drew Brees, a lot of that comes from just communication. A lot of people aren't willing to communicate because they're so used to viewing things through one lens. You have to be able to communicate, no matter conservative or liberal, Democrat, Republican, religion, race, it doesn't matter. If you want growth and change in anything you do, you have to communicate. So to see people finally communicate, that's when you're going to start to see change.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to add on to that because it is communication. That is the start. But communication on deaf ears does no good. So I'm going to say also, you know, being objective to what others are saying, just keeping an open mindset and trying to have empathy, you know what I mean, is a huge thing. When, I mean, there's a clearly a race of people in this country that are at a disadvantage, you know, and if it were, because I've met people and even heard out of their mouths say that, black people are using this whole slavery thing as an excuse. But it's like, bro, we've had everything literally that white people have had, we've got. You know what I'm saying? President, billionaires, success in every sport. So we know that we can come up out of whatever, but the same song doesn't get sung for this many years, this many generations and decades if it ain't true. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
I like what you said, the fact that you are a white man in this world, you can never really truly understand what it's like as being black in America, because it's really, I mean, and I grew up good. I'm not even like, when someone looks at me and speaks to me, they know that I'm not ignorant. They know I was raised well and I have a good head on my shoulders, but I've still been faced with injustice and discrimination and biases in this world, in this country. And, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely feel like communication is definitely key, but we need to be objective to people, and that goes across the board, regardless if it's a race conversation. It can be anything. You know what I'm saying? Because without that openness and willingness to understand and hear somebody, you're putting up a blockade in your heart and in your mind, and it's gonna limit you, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna limit the type of relationships you're able to make with people, and all across the board. It's just, I don't see any positives coming from keeping a fence and keeping your mindset, your little mindset that might not even be right, blocked out to any new people or new ideas or experiences or anything. So that's definitely a huge thing. But keeping on with this topic, sort of what's going on, I wanted to ask you, bro. I saw Kyrie's tweet about bringing the NBA back, and I wanted to ask you how you felt about it, about what he said and his stance on it.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, I want to say one thing. So I obviously, my brand is based off sports broadcasting, right? And a lot of people in my field, in my business, got into politics, and it actually like ruined their career. Mm-hmm. So I remember I called Rashad, and I was like, man, I just want. I speak on what I know. Eventually, one day, I want to do what you're doing, and I want to have a podcast where I can talk anything. But right now, I'm building my brand through sports. I want to be on TV. I want to be the best sports broadcaster there will ever be. That's my goal. Mm-hmm. And so I'm only going to speak on what I know, which is sports. But what you and I are speaking about, and I've spoken about it on my podcast now, isn't politics. Like, this is injustice, and you see Colin Cowherd's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it because we witnessed a murder. Like, this isn't, I'm not talking about a presidential election. I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about right and wrong, and like what happened was wrong. And that's why I feel I've been able to talk about this more than ever, because I think the whole world should understand this is wrong. Like, what happened to George Floyd and many others has nothing to do with politics, other than that is just pure evil and wrong. But back to what you're saying with Kyrie Irving, I 1,000% like respect and support him, and I think the NBA season is ultimately going to return. It's going to be July 30th. LeBron runs the league. Adam Silver runs the league. It's going to return. A lot of players don't have the financial backing of like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant or a Steph Curry, and even though they get paid tons of money, the lifestyle they live is based off their income. So if they don't get
that's the
income,
trap right there.
Yeah, they have to play. So people are bashing Kyrie. I've seen media personalities say, "Oh, this is the same guy that said the Earth is flat." Stop it. This has nothing to do with any of that, and they're attacking his character, which I think is wrong. If that's how he feels and that's his opinion, and I respect what he's doing and he's standing up for social injustice, 1,000% support it. But I do think the league will play. And now there's a new report saying that NBA players have until a certain date to announce if they're going to restart with the league. And what Austin Rivers said, Alex, was the best. He responded to Kyrie Irving, and he said, "Bro, we 100% support you, and we feel the same way. But us playing will still give us an opportunity to focus on social injustice, but it will allow us to make the money we need for our families and also just finish out the season." So I understand Kyrie. And I don't think he's a bad person for saying this, like people have been saying. But I hope players that support Kyrie, that ultimately end up playing, will look at it as an opportunity to come together. Like, okay, The season's returning. What can we do together to still make sure we focus on social injustice? So the league will resume, but yet they can still get their message across.
Yeah, no doubt. And how I feel about it. Well, one thing I want to touch on after I make this statement is the fact that what you said about the NBA players' lifestyles.
Yeah.
Without that paycheck coming in each month or each week, I think they get paid bi-weekly actually.
Yeah.
They're not able to support their habits or their living expenses. I kind of want to touch on that in a second because I feel like that's pretty interesting. But as far as what Kyrie said, I totally agree with Kyrie, and I understand. I'll say I understand Austin Rivers. But I do agree with Kyrie. I don't think the NBA should necessarily return unless each and every night that they have a game, they're making a statement about what's going on, because that's how it happens. I feel like this is the crack in the door. Oh, the NBA opened up. Oh, all right, now we got the NFL season. Oh, okay, let's take everyone's attention off these protests, and that's why I feel like I stand with Kyrie, because
I
opening up
understand that for sure.
yeah, opening up the season, though it does provide people, like Austin Rivers said, it provides them with the money and the opportunity to help out the people. I feel like it's bigger than that. You can help out without that money. You know what I'm saying? It's now is the time to really flip this whole system upside down, and it has to be drastic measures taken. And I feel like two things wrong with the NBA coming back. One, we're still in the midst of a fucking pandemic. So are they talking about having the audience there, or are they limiting it, or what is going on with that? You know what I'm saying? And then two, the distraction that it provides. I just feel like I said, the best analogy I can say is it's a crack in the door. You know what I'm saying? It's like allowing something subtle to happen that's against your beliefs, just because it's subtle and just because there might be some good. Like Austin Rivers said, it'll enable players to help out more. Like what y'all doing? Not saying that you guys aren't doing, but I'm saying what could be more impactful than players saying, nope, no NBA, we run this shit and we're not happy with the way things are going. You know what I'm saying? I don't think any dollar amount or any dollar contribute can be as impactful as that statement right there, showing that, the players ultimately run that league, and you billionaires and whatever that are just controlling it, that is a form of this systemic problem that's going on in America, in my eyes. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know. That's kind of the way my mind breaks it down. You feel me?
Yeah. No, that's what I was saying. This situation is such a fluid situation where I understand multiple perspectives, and that's why the people that are bashing Kyrie, oh, he's selfish, stop. That's not what this is about. This is not, if anything, he's being completely unselfish, because he could easily say, give me my paycheck, let me play and be on TV and be a superstar.
For sure.
But one thing that I can answer for sure is that when they do return to play in Orlando, that there will not be an audience. I know that, as far as the pandemic issue. So they won't have any people in the crowd. I'm not even sure, because I know I covered the Orlando Magic. I don't even think they're allowing media there, and if they do, I'm sure it's like the Woj and like just the NBA insiders.
Right.
So I know there's not going to be any crowd, and I know they're going to test the players frequently. But as far as just the issue, and like you said, taking eyes off the protest, that's a legitimate argument. And the only thing I could say to that, because I'm not really in disagreement, but the only thing I could say to play devil's advocate would be, LeBron James seems to be the guy he's obviously the face of the league, and he's probably the biggest athlete. Certainly in the United States, I would say country, but I know soccer's huge. He's like the front runner when it comes to speaking up for what's right and social injustice. Mm-hmm. So I think by him saying we can play and make it right, he may know something we don't. Like you said, maybe there is something that they can implement during the games, because obviously this is going to be solely a televised game because there's no crowd. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that if he felt like they couldn't get their message across, he wouldn't do it. So maybe he knows something we don't. Yeah,
no doubt. And I hope so, because I feel like I was saying, as far as the way the NBA and all major league sports is structured, it's like, I don't know. I kind of look at it sometimes as like, have you ever seen the movie Django?
Yeah.
You remember when there was a scene where Django goes and meets with the slave owner that owned the Candyland Ranch.
Yep.
When they first met, he had a Mandingo fight going on where it was two of his strongest slaves fighting to the death.
Yeah.
I look at Major League Sports in that aspect sometimes, and I'm reminded of this country's sort of overall feeling towards blacks in this country when, for example, that lady told LeBron shut up and dribble. Like, okay,
Right.
that's how you feel. Even if you shouldn't have said it, that's how you feel. You're not the only one with that mindset. Others share that mindset. But if you're gonna limit somebody to something, then it's kind of like, okay, well, Donald Trump, shut up, don't come for president. You are a real estate investor or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Limiting people. But for her to say that publicly when he was speaking on an issue of such importance, it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? That's a view. So, but I got trust in just the way things are gonna naturally pan out. So if the league does come back, then I ain't gonna lie, I'm gonna be watching the highlights at least. I'm not gonna watch the games because I never really do, but I'll definitely catch some highlights and be excited to see what goes on. But I feel like it's wonky now because I feel like I'm not sure the structure of it, but I know the season wasn't done yet, so I'm not sure like who gets to qualify as a playoffs. I heard it's only gonna be in Orlando, and then with no audience, I feel like that's whack too. I feel like it's kind of rushed ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation's changed because of what's going on. It's just unprecedented times. But it's going to be 22 teams, 8 regular season games, and then you go right into the playoffs. So those 22 teams, obviously, there's 12 in the West, I want to say, or there may be 13 in the West because they're allowing, like, there's so many teams that are close, so they're giving them those 8 games to possibly play in and make the playoffs. And then in the Eastern Conference, there's 9 teams, and the Wizards are the only team that have an opportunity within those 8 games to beat out the 8th seed, which I think is Orlando, to make the playoffs. And ultimately, people think they did this instead of just going with the 8 seeds from both conferences. They did this because they want to give Zion an opportunity to make the playoffs because he's a superstar. He moves the needle already.
Yeah.
So the no audience thing
I can
is
see
weird
that
too.
Actually.
Yeah, they're grooming the next superstar. I mean, I'm not saying he's the next LeBron by any means, but you can't argue with the ratings. Those are just numbers, and people watch Zion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and the no crowd aspect obviously is not the same.
That's whack. That is whack because energy, and you can relate, and so can I as high school ball players. The crowd, the players feed off the crowd, and that energy, it's unseen, but it is felt when you're at when you're at your home crowd and you hit a big
100%.
shot versus when you at the opposing team's crowd and they hit a big shot, and now the pressure is on you offensively to come back. That all ties in to the energy and the tonality of the game. You know what I mean? So I think the fact that there's no audience is whack. That's a given to me. Like, you can't have NBA with no crowd, man. That's what I think.
I know, I agree. The crowd certainly adds value. I just think they don't have another choice. It's not even like because even next season they're saying that there's going to be no crowd. So not even just about the protests or just COVID in general. They're thinking even next season there's no audience. So that's just the only choice they have. It's either that or no season, and they're certainly not going to do no season.
I can't even imagine what NBA game silently is gonna sound like.
I know they're even talking about implementing like a 2K audience sound for the.
That is crazy,
people.
Yo.
Yeah, it's just we've never we started this podcast.
That's sad, bro.
We've never seen times like this. So
never.
It's just it calls for desperate measures.
That's crazy, man. For real. But so with their no media coming in, that kind of limits your, or I don't know if it's the highlight of what you do, but I would think it's probably one of the coolest things that I see you do is the interview with the players. How do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love interviewing the players, man. That's one of my favorite things to do is just go inside the locker room, meet these guys, and just see what type of people they are. But like we kind of started this whole thing. It's like you find an obstacle, you somehow find it and you make it in a way where it motivates you to grind harder and actually become better. So now, okay, I don't get these interviews in person. How can I substitute the value that I get with these interviews? How much it builds my brand, my credibility? What can I do to substitute that? And that is grind harder on my podcast. That is attack things with a business approach where, okay, so now instead of 2 nights I'm going to Orlando, those 2 nights I can focus on sponsorships. I can focus on networking, connections. I'm working on something with Atlanta. I'm working with something in LA right now. Something popped up with Miami. So I just redirect that energy towards something else. So it may not necessarily add the same value. It could be it's just different. So now it's just allowing me to grow in different areas. But of course, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't miss it or whatever. Of course, it's an unfortunate situation, but I can truly say it's given me an opportunity to explore different options with this more time. And I think, I don't want to go too ahead, but I mean, this is your first podcast, so I might as well break some news on your podcast. I'm thinking I'm going to have a couple NBA players coming on my podcast here shortly.
I can see it. So hold on, let's pump the brakes because some of our listeners, I mean, I'm following you. Some of our listeners might not quite, they don't know you just yet. So, like I said in the beginning, Max has a podcast called the MVP Podcast, Max Van Auken Podcast, and it's basically a sports broadcasting platform where he gives predictions, correct and accurate predictions, I should say.
I appreciate it.
He gets sports interviews and just kind of gives his take on pretty much all sports, right?
Yeah, all sports, just theorize, and I just always try to provide content that you can't get anywhere else. There's thousands of podcasts, there's thousands of sports talk shows, so I try to make mine unique and just kind of give you a reason to listen to it. You're going to hear things that you probably haven't heard before. You may completely disagree and call me crazy, or it may make you think and say, hey, that guy may be onto something. Either way, I just like to keep people interested.
Right. And along with that, some of the things Max has been able to do, gained access just from being a hard worker, being dope at his job, he gained access locker room access to the Orlando Magic. So he's interviewed people like Klay Thompson, Carmelo Anthony. Name some other names of people you've interviewed.
Kawhi Leonard, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I've done Trae Young. I've done Zach LaVine. I've done Draymond Green, like Coach Kerr. There's just been like Kevin Love, Hassan Whiteside, like you said, Carmelo Anthony.
Big names, man. Vince Carter.
Jokic. Yeah, Vince Carter. There's I have the list on my phone actually. I've always kept it. Aaron Gordon, Mo Bamba, all the Magic players, of course. So yeah, it's given me an opportunity to speak to a lot of great guys.
Yeah, and I remember when I first heard that we were in class, and you were telling everybody about your podcast and some of the people that you've interviewed, and the first thing I was thinking was like, how? Like, who are you connected with, and how'd you get that connection? And then, once it was explained to me, like the path of your journey was kind of laid out to me and explained, I'm like, makes sense. Like, hard work pays off. But let me ask you this, what was it that made you choose podcasting or sports broadcasting, if you will?
Okay. Sports has always been my favorite thing in this world since I was young. Like, I trained MMA when I was 4 years old, and then eventually I stopped when I got into high school and did basketball. Fell in love with basketball. Well, middle school I fell in love with basketball, and then I obviously played basketball. Love football. Sports is just, I think, is so unique. It unifies people. It's just, honest. It's the highlight of my life is sports. So I knew I wanted to do something involved with sports. Can I play professionally? No, I'm not playing professionally. So what can I do to be around it? I can't stop talking. I get in trouble in class for talking. I like to think I'm a pretty bright guy. So I'd get good grades, but I'd always get in trouble in class for talking. I remember watching sports on TV, these talk shows. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. I want to talk sports for a living. That would be my dream job. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. So one night, I'm just laying down, and I'm a very impatient person. Like, if I have a goal, what can I do tonight to get started? What can I do? I don't want to wait around. I don't want to wait until I'm older. What can I do now to to get closer to what I want to do. And so I'm like, I think podcast is the trend. I'm like, what? Okay, so how can I start a podcast? So literally, I just couldn't get sleep one night because I was obsessed with researching how to start a podcast. And then once I figured out how to do that, it just took off from there. I'm like, okay, this is how I do it. I gotta do the artwork. I gotta find a distributor to distribute the podcast to all these different radio stations like iHeartRadio or Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Okay, how can I grow the podcast? I gotta get guests. Who can I reach for these guests? So like it just started. One thing just led to another. It was a domino effect, and I'm still doing it to this day. And then eventually it got recognized through the radio station here at Daytona Beach, 104.7. I spoke to Frank. I sat down with him. He really liked the show. And so now I've been on there. And so it's continuously evolving and just trying to do something bigger than your next move and your last move and just keep growing.
Definitely, man. And that was going to be one of my questions for you was sort of how you got started. And you kind of explained, but after you got the, because I know it didn't happen that quick. After you had the idea and you figured out how to go about doing it, what sort of like what happened next? You know what I mean?
Originally, the Max Van Auken podcast isn't the first podcast I had. I started it with my cousin on another podcast in the past. So I'm like, okay, I called him up. I'm like, let's do this. So he's like, okay. So we just met up in a living room and literally recorded my very first episode I've ever recorded. I just put a phone on the table like I'm doing right now and just hit record. And I'm like, okay, DeMarcus Cousins just got traded. Literally all-star break. What are we going to do? What do you feel about it? And I remember looking back at it, and I'm like, that was pretty good. We literally just spoke for 30 minutes, and it was easy. And okay, I'm like, wow, that was okay. And so then I'm like, but we didn't have mics. I didn't have anything. So I was like, okay, so now what? So then I'm like, I have no idea what do I do with this audio file? It needs to be MP3. So it all started with recording on a phone in a living room. And then eventually I'm like, oh, wow, I need a system. I need some type of – and I remember the first thing I ever got was a PreSonus, I believe it's called. And I'm like, okay, so I need 2 mics for him and I. So we got 2 mics, the cheapest mics we can find. Okay, how does that all of a sudden just turn into a podcast? So it drove me insane. And I'm like, I have no idea how to make this into a podcast. So then I okay, that's how you upload it to Apple Podcast. I need the artwork to be this measurement. And I just wish there was a video. I remember complaining, Alex. I was like, why is there not one video explaining how to make a podcast? Like, there's not one video saying, oh, this is how you do it. This is how you edit the artwork. There was nothing. So I was like,
they weren't that big yet.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I just got to learn. So then eventually I learned it. And then it just kind of continued to grow. We record once a week. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then him and I obviously had a falling out, and it didn't go the way I wanted it to go. But it's all a blessing at the end of the day because now I have my own, and it's bigger than it's ever been.
That's right, man. And so at what point in time did the realization come to you that, yo, this is what I want to do. I want to make this my career. I want to make this sort of my thing. When did that hit you?
When I'm trying to think of the very first interview I did. I think it was like it really hit me when I interviewed. God, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think my first big interview I ever did was with Amanda Nunes, and she's considered and she's considered the greatest women's fighter ever. And I remember going to like all these local MMA bouts, and I would interview all these local fighters. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool, interviewing these local fighters. They may be something one day. And I remember seeing Amanda Nunes cage side at a local event in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, I got to ask her a question. And my family's like, bro, she's sitting cage side. They have security. I don't think you can just do that. I'm like, you don't know until you don't try. So I was like, I walked, I'm like, security, can you ask her if she can just have one word? That's all I need is one question. And she's like, okay, sure. And I think her girlfriend at the time was telling her no, but she took it anyway. And I pressed record on my phone. I put it up to her, and I said, listen, this was 2 years before this happened, Alex. I promise you. I even documented it. And I said, this is the era of super fights. This is when Conor and Floyd were just about to fight. And I said, do you ever vision yourself fighting Chris Cyborg for a super fight? Hey. And she said, and she's like, yeah, I could see that. 2 years later, that happens, and she knocks out Chris Cyborg, which I predicted the upset. So once I saw that, wow, I can talk to the biggest people imaginable and have an impact and be heard, I'm like, this is what I want to do. And I think that's the moment where it hit me, like, these are people too. And then once I covered the Orlando Magic, it literally just solidified everything I wanted to do. I'm like, these are normal guys watching. Like, I've seen NBA players. DJ Augustine watches my story all the time. Like, I'm trying to get Colin Sexton on the show. Like, these are normal guys watching my show. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm talking to people I grew up watching, and they're listening to my show. I'm like, this is 100% what I want to do.
That's amazing, bro. That's so crazy, that story. I never heard that story.
Yeah, I don't think I ever told you that one.
No, that's crazy. So let me ask you, from that moment, like, what's the one thing? Because a lot of people would have, even myself, if I was in your position, I would have had some self-doubt. Like, man, I'm a nobody. She's not gonna want to talk to me. They're gonna say something if I pull out my phone and try to record it or whatever. Yeah. So you had that ambition. What's the biggest thing you took away from that moment?
I think it was just that, being aggressive. Like, you can't. Nothing is going to be given to you. Like, you have to go get it. If I didn't go interview her, I would have never learned that by myself. Now, I could have went there. This has happened to me. I reach out to guests all the time. They tell me no. I was willing to accept no. And I think I was even, like, in a tank top at the moment. I think I spilled a drink on my collared shirt. So I'm literally running up to Amanda Nunes with a tank top on. Like, I could not look any more unprofessional. I'm not advising people to do that. I'm just saying, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going for it. And I went to her, and once I got that, I'm like, aggressive wins. Aggressive wins in absolutely everything you do. Now, don't just blindly do something just to be aggressive. Obviously, be strategic, know what you want to talk about.
Right.
But that is what I took away most from it, is like, okay, yeah, it can be embarrassing if she told me no. It could be demoralizing.
Yeah.
But I will never know the upside if I don't take it.
Big risk, big reward.
100%.
Word. That's 100%. Crazy, man. That's a dope story. So, let me ask you this then. What do you, and you might have already said it, but let me ask anyway. What do you feel like, what type of mindset do you feel is needed when pursuing your dream? And not just you, anybody.
Self-belief, because you have to, for one, you have to have passion, of course. If you're chasing anything you love, you have to have passion. I'm not trying to speak like I know because I haven't accomplished it yet, but I don't think people should chase money. I think they should chase what they love. Money will come. When you chase what you love, you're willing to do anything to achieve it because it's what you love to do. Like, if you love shooting hoops, I'm sure your mom at one point had to say, come inside, it's getting late, but you wanted to keep shooting.
And you know what we told her? You know what we told her every time? Hold on, Ma, we got game point. And we have been restarted a whole nother game.
Right, 100%. So I think, for one, you have to have passion if you want to chase something you love. Because then you're willing to you're willing to go up to Amanda Nunes in a tank top. Like, you're willing to stand outside in the freezing cold weather until the door opens so you could be the first person somewhere that you want to be. Like, you have to have passion and you have to have self-belief, because obviously, like, you have to have some type of talent if it's something you want to be good at. But hard work, I know it's a cliche saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, but it's true. Like, if you work hard, that comes with passion, because you're passionate about it, you're going to work hard. So you have to have passion and you have to have self-belief, because everybody at one point started from the bottom. Amazon, he worked out of an office. Now look at Jeff Bezos. He's the richest man in the world. Everybody, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, I probably pronounced that wrong. They started out in a garage. Like, everybody started somewhere, but that self-belief is what pushed them through the doubts. It's what pushed them through the failures, because you, me, I don't care who it is, Michael Jordan, I know he's 6 for 6. LeBron James, everybody has failed. Everybody's been told no. Somebody's written you off. But if you have self-belief and you have passion, that will get you through anything.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. And, my podcast is really geared towards, I like to say it's geared towards the youth, but it's really geared towards the youth as far as mindset and just people that are in infancy stages of their mind when it comes to believing in themselves and taking a chance on themselves. So I like to talk to people who have what I feel like reach a certain level of success in their respective career, and them give advice. And you know what you just said, I couldn't agree more with, because you know the no's cannot discourage you from doing what you believe in. You're gonna get a
Right.
thousand no's before you get that one yes you're looking for. But that
Yep.
one yes is gonna be enough fuel for you to continue to get some more no's until you get that next yes. And through the search of getting that yes, the no's are like jabs. You're getting jabbed, right? And in your mind, you're going to have two conversations. And for a lot of people, the louder conversation is the one that says, man, stop going out there and getting hit. Come back here, sit down, and get coddled and relax. You know what I'm saying? But the conversation you need to have, which is that self belief, is, no, I'm about to knock his ass out. I'm about to
Yep.
knock this struggle, this hurdle, this challenge out, and I'm gonna become victorious. And so those are the two things that's for sure. You got to be consistent, and you have to have enough positive self-talk to keep yourself going, because there are going to be some rainy days. You know what I mean? There are going to be rainy days if you choose to play it safe and work at a 9 to 5. You know what I'm saying? But if you gamble on yourself and you get through those rainy days, you keep on going. When you hit that level of success, man, it's gonna feel worth it. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. And honestly, they're like, I don't know if you call it petty or there's a word for this, but like my whole life, I'm not trying to play the victim because I'm certainly not a victim compared to what other people have to go through. But like, I remember not making the high school basketball team, and I remember looking at Coach Joe, and I was like, really? And Coach Joe and I are cool, so I don't mind telling the story. It's not like I'm beefing or anything, but I was like, okay, bet. So then I remember making the next team. I had trouble with grades, so I transferred schools, and I was like, okay, so I went from not playing. He didn't want to play me over this person. I'm like, okay, just wait until I play Creek. Just wait. I remember the first thing I did is I went to Coach Howard. I'm like, hey, I know this is going to be probably next year because they're not even scheduled for this year. I want two things. I want a state championship, and I want to beat Creek. That's all I ask from you. I'm like, if I play a lot of minutes, if you need me to take a lesser role, whatever it takes to achieve those two goals is what I'm going to do. And he said, I promise you we're going to do our best to do both. We ended up beating Creek. And I just remember, like, that I just always remember being overlooked, and I just remember not making a team. I didn't even make it my 8th grade year in basketball, and I remember I ended up making the team because I used to go into the gym even when I wasn't on the roster, and I used to do laps while they were practicing. And they're like, okay, come on. And they made room for me to play.
Damn.
Because because I was just like, I can't accept not, I'm going to do everything I can. And I just think being raised that way or going through that, sports has taught me so much. And that's part of why I love sports so much.
Anyway, what do you think is what do you think is your biggest hurdle that you faced throughout your career so far, and what was the mindset to kind of keep you pushing through it?
The biggest hurdle so far would be there's two of them. One is financially. Like I just being honest, being a college student, working like 3 jobs, trying to do the podcast, funding the podcast. I pay for, of course, I get in for free for the Orlando Magic, but having to pay for gas, pay for parking, a lot of times where I can't even afford it, like I'll do it because I understand the greater, like the end goal. So It's like, I could use this for a meal, or do I use it for an interview with Carmelo? And I'm like, I'm going to skip dinner tonight and I'm going to get Carmelo. And so I know that interview is going to end up giving me recognition from a boss one day. So that to me, and I'm fine with it because that's just a part of life. I think everybody goes through that part in life unless you're raised in a good situation. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm not obviously from a super rich family or whatever. So as a college student financially, of course, that's always tough. But just from a goal perspective, I went through a pretty hard obstacle when I had to transition from my original podcast to this one. I went through a really hard lesson. I learned that you can't trust anybody, and it's such a cold thing to say because there are people you should be able to trust. But I noticed no matter what position you're in, you should always make sure you look at the whole situation through an unbiased lens, because I got screwed over pretty badly.
Right.
I got burnt from people I didn't think I'd be burnt by, and it made me just like, wow, I'm really happy I learned this lesson now, because if I were making hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, this would have changed my whole life. So I got to learn that now before any real money was made, before my brand was really that, like, it was like the other podcast was really growing, and this hurt, and like it really hurt me, but it allowed me to look in the mirror and learn and overcome that hurdle. And now I understand situations. Like, I was a young, I'm still young now, but I was just very, oh my God, interview, podcast. This is amazing. But there's a whole business side to it
that you were naive to. You didn't.
That
really,
I was not used to.
Really
sponsorships and money and partners, and that made me realize that whole other side of the world. And now I get it.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I like that. One message that seems to be consistent with you is not letting money or the lack of things prevent you from moving forward. And I try to tell people that a lot. I've invested in real estate, and I got started with a shoestring budget, and I try to tell people that, you know, you can do it with a very little bit of money. And that's pretty much true for a lot of things, because even if you had all the equipment you needed when you first started, who's to say you would even know how to use that, or who's to say you would even appreciate the value of what those things could do? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So yeah, that's a big thing that I think more people need to really hold true to themselves. Is like, you don't need an abundance of cash or an abundance of material things to get started on something. You said you had the cheapest mics you guys could buy. I'm recording right now on a cheap mic. You know what I'm saying? And you know, you're not rich. You know what I'm saying? But you still find a way to allocate the funds to get you to Orlando for the opportunity to boost your followers, or, you know, for some great content. So it's about prioritizing, it's about grinding, and it's about having that dogged mindset, like you always like to talk about. And shout outs to David Goggins for kind of presenting that to the world. You know what I mean? But you definitely have that, bro.
I appreciate it. I try. I really do. And it's, man, I'm not trying to like brag or show off, but I'm really confident in where I want to go, because I know the work that I'm putting in and will put in. So everything I do, I document. And not just my picks. I'm talking about before interviews. I'm recording before I interview someone. Like the biggest interview I ever had, in my opinion, to me, was Rob Parker or Rashad Phillips, because they are what I want to be.
Right.
And so I interviewed Rob Parker. I didn't have a nice studio. I don't have a good setup. I'm not like with just everything that you need to be successful. I'm actually in a parking lot with no AC in my car. And I'm interviewing him in Target parking lot. And so it's like, that's not the ideal situation. That's not what I want, but that's the type of stuff that you'll always remember.
That's the stuff that you tell people about when you make it to where you want to be, and they're complaining about whatever it is. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I know when I do have a studio one day, I'm like, oh, come on now. This is all I need. Like, I'm used to being my producer. I'm used to recording in a car with no AC. So I wouldn't even change it. I don't want to change it right now, because I love that. I love that I can do it, because now when I do get something nicer one day, it's just going to be a luxury instead of a necessity.
Definitely. And you kind of touched on it, but I was going to ask you, where does your confidence come from? Because I listen to your podcast and your interviews, and even when you just speak, you come across very confident. Where would you say that comes from?
Man, I don't even know if I have an answer for you, because I had a really I go on a lot of road trips with my brother Rob to see family and stuff. And when you're in a car with someone for like 7 hours, you pretty much talk about everything. And that's something he asked me. He's like, you know, I met your family. He's like, obviously, like, they're my family. It's like, I know your mom, I know your dad. They're great people. But where do you get that from? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I think maybe just the way, my pops always taught me, like, don't you ever not believe in yourself. So that's something he's always taught me. And I think maybe doing martial arts when I was young, I think that has a huge influence, because it teaches you like the fundamentals of respect, have confidence in yourself, treat people with respect. I think I just realized if you don't have confidence in yourself, why would anyone have confidence in you? So I think like when my parents got divorced, or I think it just stems from probably just family issues or just having to persevere through things and just realize like, dang, like this is probably not the ideal situation. I can either be a victim and be upset and not achieve what I want and probably even be more upset, or I can just pick my head up high and just keep my chest up and just do what I need to do and power through it. And then I don't know, I just find motivation in a lot of things, like how David Goggins, like I'm reading his book or like his videos, and that's the type of mentality I try to have. So he got motivated just by watching Rocky. I remember watching Rocky, and that's the type of stuff that I love. Like I find motivation in that. I'm like, okay, if he could do it, why can't I do it? So I think that's just kind of where it comes from. If that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And I was gonna say, if I had to guess, it probably comes from your ambition and then your work ethic, and those combined, you know, they birth confidence. You're confident in what you do because you want it really bad and you put in the work to achieve it. You know what I mean? But
I appreciate that, man.
yeah, no doubt, bro. You earned it. Like I'm not saying this just to be cool with you. I'm saying it because this is what I observed from you. So no doubt, bro. Another thing I wanted to ask you was someone who is of, I would say, that grinds real hard pretty much all the time. You know what I mean? What does a typical day look like for you when you're at your most productive? You know what I mean?
It's a great question because with this pandemic, it kind of switched everything up. But what it was okay. So I wake up at probably 7. Well, I was waking up at 6:30, and I would go to work at God, not even that. Come on, my schedule changes like all the time. But what it was I would wake up around actually 5, work out before work, and then I would go to work at the school at that front desk. I had to be there by 7:30. So then I would work it there. I would go to class. So I already got my lift in, I got my work in, and then I got my school in. And then I would, throughout my job there, I actually was networking because I had to sit at the front desk and just greet people, make sure people were signed in. So I'd use that time to do homework and network. So I'm at least spending an hour or two a day on podcast ideas, reaching out to people who are interesting guests that I think I can get. And then obviously after class, then I go home and I'm recording that podcast and then start it over. And then maybe twice a day, instead of going home and recording that podcast twice a week, I'm going to Orlando for a Magic game. So I have to check a workout box, a school box, a work box, and a podcast box every day. That's what I try to do. So like now with this pandemic, wake up, work out, go to work, got to pay the bills. And then while I'm at work, I'm thinking of ideas. I'm even networking on my breaks. So then I check those boxes. School, I don't have class at the moment. So go home, call some people, set up some job opportunities, record a podcast, anything to benefit my future, call it a wrap. Every once in a while, go out if there's any opportunities and just see a couple friends or family members. That's about it.
Definitely, man. So how often do you record an episode?
When this first happened, I was going about 3 a week. And then since then, it's been more about, I've focused more on some opportunities I'm trying to get this year. So I'm about 1 or 2 a week right now because I'm always tweaking what I'm doing. And I noticed, I'm like, okay, I can't throw out too much content at once because it's oversaturation. It's diluting my product. I want to make it where when I drop something, it's having an impact. Like there's so many different ways to approach it. So there's no really right way. I noticed my numbers were going up when I recorded a lot, but then I also noticed that my numbers were pretty good once, instead of having 3 episodes that week, I may have 1, but that 1 I'm going to make sure is just amazing. So it has to be my best performance every time because you never know who's listening. So you have guys like Gary Vee who are like push content every single day. Why would you not listen to him? Look where he's at. But then you look at other people. It's easy to do that once you've reached that brand and that stature, but sometimes you have to make sure it's the right content that you're posting. So right now I'm about 1 a week, but it's probably going to switch up in about a week or 2 where it's probably going to be a little bit more.
Does Gary Vee, does he say release content all the time or create content all the time?
That's a great point. He obviously is creating content all the time because his whole thing is be in your face constantly. I think there's this video where he said he spends about an hour or two, maybe not anymore, but he did an hour or two of just looking up popular hashtags and commenting under those hashtags that are fit your brand. So you're putting yourself out there. You're in someone's face. You're in someone's face.
Damn, that's dope.
Now you're on YouTube. You're on Instagram. You're on Twitter, Facebook. Be on Snapchat. Be an early adapter. Go to TikTok. He's all about constant content. But that's a great point. Are you releasing? Or are you creating? So
yeah,
I would say he's releasing, but
no. But I was asking, what do you think he's preaching that? I mean, you can take it two ways, because releasing content all the time, I can see it becoming watered down or oversaturated. But creating, always having something to sit on, I see that as, you're sharpening your skills, everything like that. But yeah, either way, I think it's good advice, and however one chooses to take it, as long as you're making content, I feel like you're in the right playing field for sure. So before we get into our last part of this, I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest advice to someone who is sitting on an idea or a dream, and for whatever reason or whatever excuse, they haven't taken action yet? What is your advice to that person? And then part two of that is, what is your same advice to that kid in high school that feels like they're too young or whatever?
It would be look in the mirror and figure out why you're not doing it, because there's deep reasons for everything. So what's your excuse? Is it that deep down you're scared and you're acting like you're just busy? Or it's what David Goggins would say is the accountability mirror. Look in the mirror, be honest with yourself, what's the actual issue at hand, and attack it. And then attack what you're most scared of, what you're most insecure about, be aggressive and do it. If there's something that you truly, truly want to do, and what most people I think go through is they're scared of failure, because failure means disappointment, means being down, it means being upset, looked down upon. Stop. You're going to fail. Be aggressive, look yourself in the mirror, whatever that issue is that's bothering you, and just completely attack it and go crazy on it. And from that point on, you will get what you want. And it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next week, it may not be next month, but if you attack it every single day, you will end up finishing the race. It's just, you can't ever finish a race if you don't start it. And then your second part of the question was, if someone that's scared in high school,
or just feels like they're too young, or because I promote that type of thinking, where people are young kids are wanting to do for themselves and create a way for themselves. So for that kid that's thinking like they're too young to have an impact, or whatever the case may be, what do you say to them?
Then it's just an excuse. You're never too young or too old to do anything. Because if you would have told, I guarantee you, if you tell, like, my grandma, right? She's obviously 90 years, well, you don't know, but she's 90 years old. If you were to tell her growing up, hey, there's going to be a thing called Fortnite where you're going to have kids with headsets that are going to play on this really big high-def screen, and the person that wins it's going to make millions, she'd say, that's impossible. So that's never going to happen. If you were to tell my grandma, hey, there's going to be a thing called Uber where you're going to get in a stranger's car to drive you somewhere, that's going to end up disrupting the taxi system. She'd say, what are you talking about? And there's just barriers that you may not think can be broken, but all barriers can be broken. So you're never too young, you're never too old. There's no need to put a limit on yourself, because if you do that, then what's going to stop anybody from putting a limit on yourself? If you're in middle school and you have a great idea, you should go at it. If you're in high school and you have a good idea, go at it. The younger you are and you start that idea, the more time you have to perfect it.
Yep. The quicker, by the time you're out of the infancy stages or the hurdles, the 5 year, they say it takes 5 years for a business to find out if a business is going to be successful or not. You're getting that out the way by the age 21 type
right
thing.
Away.
You know what I mean? So where most people are, if they're lucky, if they're on top of things, are getting started, you're that much in advance. But I ain't gonna lie. You say your grandma's 90?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you'd have told her there's gonna be a black president, she'd probably smack you. They'd be like, "What?"
Well, I'm about to say, for what may not seem imaginable today, tomorrow you have no idea.
No idea, for sure, man. And then last question, and then we're gonna move into the 5 for 5 fire round. What advice do you have for me? Obviously, this is my first episode of a new podcast. What advice would you give to me to help me, just improve on what I got going on.
What advice would I give to Alex to beat you? Because you are one of one. Everyone, like there's no need to emulate, copy, or do anything other than what you are. Because like this conversation we're having now is what I think people will like. Is it's a raw, authentic conversation. You're giving me your honest opinion. You're giving me what you truly think, and that's what makes you unique. There will never be anyone else that can be like you, and I'm just being real. So for you, do what makes Alex Alex, and I think that's what's going to give you the most honest and raw fan base. That's why people like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan isn't trying to be like anybody else. He's trying to be Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And he says how he feels, and sometimes that limits his opportunities with the TV network because they know they can't control him. But now, what did he just do? He signed a $100 million deal with Spotify by being who he is.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
Alex needs to be Alex, and you work hard, bro. You're smart. You have, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, the same thing you said about me with the drive, and that's why you and I click so well, is you have that too. So I know your hard work is going to be there, so I don't need to give you advice to work hard. I don't need to give you advice to have passion. All I want to give you advice is don't conform to what people want you to conform to. Make sure you're just being who you are.
For sure, bro. I appreciate that. And yeah, I love asking people as far as Joe Rogan's podcast, like, yo, what's the Joe Rogan podcast about? Any and everything.
It's amazing. It's
amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
For sure.
And that's what, dude, that you literally just now, in your own way, did what he does. And you put your own twist on it. You talked about social injustice. We just talked about basketball. You talked about business. You talked about entrepreneurship. You talked about motivation. You just did the same exact thing, and you may not even notice you did it.
For sure, man. I appreciate that. All right, man. For this next part, we're going to name it the 5 for 5 fire round. And basically, I'm just going to ask you 5 questions back to back. Questions are going to kind of be all over the place, kind of random, right? And you're just going to answer them back to back, all right?
Okay, let's get it.
All right, so question 1. What is one player you would compare your interviewing and sports broadcasting style to?
I'm going to go Steph Curry. Because, do you want me to explain?
Yep, go ahead and explain.
I wanted to say LeBron, but if I said LeBron, I thought people weren't going to like that. I'm going to go Steph Curry because I think I bring things to the table that people haven't seen before. And he changed the game, and with the three-point shot, and now everyone's mimicking it, I think my analogies and the way I approach things will ultimately end up changing the game.
I like that. And I can see that because, your comparisons.
He's been doubted.
Yep. Some people have been biting on your comparison style and everything like that. So I can definitely see that. Okay. Next question is, with the COVID-19 and the lockdown and people having to be at their homes for longer periods of time than they're used to, I looked at it as like a time to work on yourself and, spend some time with you, maybe your family, whatever. What's one thing that you've learned since the whole lockdown?
Family is the most important thing, and it sounds so cliche, but I think you notice like who truly, like, I don't know if you noticed this or you went through this, but when I went through my phone to check up on people, like the first couple people I thought of, I'm like, wow, those people had the biggest impact on me because those were the first people I reached. Like I reached out to you, reached out to Anastasia, like I reached out to like a handful of friends and then family, and it just made me cherish the people more that I reached out to because it made you realize how much they mean to you. Because when things go wrong, you don't know what's going on. Those are the people you immediately think about. And I think maybe in your everyday life, like just going to class, you may not think about that because, hey, I know I'm going to see Alex tomorrow. But when you don't see someone for that long and you have no idea when's the next time you're going to see them, it makes you kind of just cherish that more.
No doubt, for sure, yeah. So, and then number 3, one thing that you've learned since the protests and the current state of the world.
That I think change can happen. And I just think, because I knew racism existed, like I knew social injustice existed, but I wasn't sure that, like I felt the way I go about things is I like change and growth, right? But I didn't know the world was willing to change or grow. And I think everything that happened, I learned that I think it is. And I think what seemed maybe impossible, I don't think is impossible. And I think the world is going to change. And I think this younger generation, like our generation, I've never seen so many people my age care about what's going on in the current world. Like, normally they're more consumed about like a TV show or a trend, a dance, a sporting event. But every person I know is talking about the social injustice, and I didn't think that would be possible. So to see everybody change, like create change, and not stop until change happens, that surprised me.
I love that answer. I love that because I couldn't agree more. Everybody's talking about
it's
this.
powerful.
It is powerful, man. And like I said, I hope it continues. I really do. I hope it continues until we've seen the change that we want start being implemented. For sure. All right, and the last question I got for you is, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word successful?
Happiness.
Love that. I love that.
Happiness, because there's so many different, like, my definition of success may be different than yours, may be different from anyone. Like, is it money? Is it family? Is it having a loving family? Is it having the career you want? There's so many different definitions of success, but ultimately I think what we're all pursuing is what makes you happy.
Yeah,
so I'd say happiness.
Yeah, it's the thing that we think money or materials or all that stuff brings, But the number one thing is happiness. Definitely feel like we're all chasing that to some degree. Really, we're all chasing it. But the important thing is to remember that you define your happiness. So if you're trying to be successful and at the core of that definition is happiness, then you define it. So you define when you are successful. But keep pushing and don't sell yourself short. That's the main thing. But anyway, I want to thank my guest, Max. Max, I really appreciate you coming through and chopping it up with me. Max has been on my case for over a year now about getting this podcast out, him and a few other people. So it's here now. It's finally here, man. I appreciate you for coming on. I appreciate you for keeping it, 1,000 with me throughout this whole interview. And, you know what I'm saying? Big things to come. But why don't you tell the people where they can find you at, how they can get in contact with you, how they can follow what you have going on with your podcast, and how they can reach out if they're interested in your content.
Okay, so first and foremost, I want to say thank you, Alex. I have been on you, and you delivered. I am proud of you, like, seriously, because I knew what you can do and what you will do. So to see you do it, like, there's nothing I like more than seeing people like I care about succeed and do what they love. So that, to me, I'm so happy you let me on your podcast, and to be one of the very first people on it is an absolute honor. Anytime you need me on it, I want to get you on mine. So that's the first foremost. For sure. But where they can find me is Instagram or Twitter. That's where I'm heavy, Max Van Auken. And then I'm also, obviously, my podcast is available on any podcast platform. That's Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, just the Max Van Auken Podcast, the MVP. I'm everywhere you can find me. And then my YouTube channel, I'm trying to keep building it up, but sometimes it gets hard with the videos. But I'm on YouTube as well, Max Van Auken.
For sure. So everybody out there, go ahead and follow my man Max on all social media platforms. And that does it for tonight's episode, everyone. I really appreciate you for tuning in and kicking it with me here at the MMU Mind Made Up Podcast. I want to say thank you again to my guest, Max Van Auken. Go follow him. He just gave you the platforms to go follow. Make sure you do that. And, man, I'm looking forward to the next episode. I'm looking forward to the growth of this thing. I'm looking forward to you all's feedback. Go ahead and like it if you care for it. You can hit me up personally, give me some feedback. If you have a business or you're working on a business of your own, or you feel like you'd be a good fit for this show, then hit me up and let's see if we can put something together. I'm really excited about the growth that is about to happen with this whole thing. So, like I said, man, thank you. Y'all have a great night. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep believing. mind made up.
Yes, my daddy drive a Cadillac, but me, I never lack. If it ain't exactly what I ordered, I'ma send it back and tell the plug. Give me another pack on top of that. Skirt, skirt, skirt. I'm going too fast. They say I'm too much. I just say it's too bad. Early in the morning, trying to get the moolah. Think I need to move around. Yeah, that's my mood now. Burning with my broski. Back at the boondock, at the spot. Yeah, I put the racks in the futon. It's just the way I roll. I already rolled up. I can't just roll one. Some say I'm too much. Some say I'm too much. Some say I'm too much. Won't nobody do nothing. Shining like a diamond, like my daddy was a jeweler. Back when my big brother told me I was too young. Trying to keep my cool, but I just might be too much. Some say I'm too much.